Beyond the Facts Investigations. Episode 05, JonBenét Ramsey, The House on 15th Street. On the morning of December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey came downstairs at 5:30 in the morning. She found a ransom note on the staircase. 3 pages. Handwritten. It demanded $118,000 for the safe return of her daughter. She called 911. The call lasted 4 minutes. Patsy Ramsey was audibly distressed. She could barely form complete sentences. The dispatcher told her to stay on the line and not to hang up. She hung up. She called her pastor. She called 2 sets of friends, John and Barbara Fernie, and Fleet and Priscilla White. They all came to the house. The police arrived. Detectives walked through the rooms. Friends and neighbors moved freely through the home. Evidence was touched. Coffee was brewed. People sat in the kitchen. The crime scene was compromised before anyone fully understood what they were looking at. It would take 7 hours before anyone searched the basement. At 1 in the afternoon, Detective Linda Arndt, the only officer remaining in the house by that point, asked John Ramsey to search the home for anything unusual. He went downstairs with Fleet White. He opened a door. And found his daughter. He carried her upstairs. In doing so, he moved the body from the crime scene. Evidence that could never be fully reconstructed was lost in that single moment. It was not yet 2 o'clock in the afternoon on December 26, 1996. And everything that would come after, the investigation, the suspicion, the years of unanswered questions, had already been shaped by what happened in those first 8 hours. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was 6 years old. She had been born on August 6, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia. She was the younger child of JonBenét Ramsey and Patricia Ann Ramsey, known to everyone as Patsy. John Ramsey was the founder and CEO of Access Graphics, a computer services company that had grown to be a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. By 1996, the company had reached revenues of over $1 billion. John Ramsey was, by any measure, a wealthy and successful man. He had been married once before. He had 3 children from that first marriage. One of them, his eldest daughter, Elizabeth, had died in a car accident in 1992. He carried that loss quietly. Patsy Ramsey had been Miss West Virginia in 1977. She had competed in Miss America. She was vivacious, socially skilled, and deeply invested in her children. She had survived ovarian cancer in the early 1990s, a diagnosis that had been serious, and a recovery that she described as a miracle. The family had moved to Boulder, Colorado, in 1991. They lived in a 14-room Tudor-style house on 15th Street. The house had been decorated elaborately for Christmas. It was, by all accounts, a beautiful home in a beautiful neighborhood in one of the most pleasant cities in America. JonBenét had an older brother named Burke. He was 9 years old. He was, by every account, a quiet and unassuming child. The 4 of them had lived, to all outward appearances, an enviable life. JonBenét had been entered in child beauty pageants since she was 4 years old. This fact became central to how the public would understand her death, and central to the judgments that would be made about her family. The pageant photographs were broadcast on every television network in the country within days of her murder. A 6-year-old girl with styled hair, bright lipstick, rhinestone costumes. Images that were designed for a specific context, the world of child pageants, where such presentation was standard, were suddenly being shown to an audience of millions who had no frame of reference for that world. The reaction was immediate and largely negative. People questioned the judgment of any parent who would dress a child that way. The pageant photographs became evidence, in the court of public opinion, of something wrong in the Ramsey household, something that predisposed people to believe that the answer to JonBenét's murder lay within her own family. Whether that instinct was correct is still unknown. What is known is that it shaped the investigation from the beginning. The night of December 25 had been, by all accounts, an ordinary Christmas night. The Ramseys had attended a holiday party at the home of their friends the Whites. JonBenét had fallen asleep in the car on the way home. John Ramsey carried her inside. She was put to bed in her clothes, she would change in the morning, they decided. Burke was put to bed. The house went quiet. Patsy Ramsey finished some wrapping and packing. The family was planning to leave the next morning for a vacation in Michigan. She went to bed between 10 and 10:30. At some point in the night, something happened. When exactly, and to whom, and by whom, has never been definitively established. The official time of death was placed between 10 p.m. on December 25 and 6 a.m. on December 26. A window of 8 hours. A window during which the entire family was in the house. No alarms were triggered. No neighbors reported seeing anything. No one reported a car parked on the street. No footprints were found in the snow outside, though the snow coverage was partial and disputed. A window well in the basement showed signs of disturbance. A broken window in a basement room had been left unlatched. Someone had been in that basement. The question that has never been answered, is who? The ransom note became one of the most analyzed documents in American crime history. It was 3 pages long. This alone was unusual. Professional kidnappers write short notes. They give instructions. They demand money. They specify the terms of exchange. They do not narrate. This note narrated. It was addressed to John Ramsey by name. It opened with formal language, "We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction," and then shifted tone repeatedly, moving between bureaucratic phrasing and emotional language, between threats and almost casual commentary. It demanded exactly $118,000. This was the number that stopped investigators cold. $118,000. Not 100,000. Not 200,000. Not a round number that a stranger might choose to suggest wealth without specific knowledge. 118,000. Which was, to the dollar, the amount of John Ramsey's bonus from Access Graphics that year. That figure had not been reported publicly. It was not in any newspaper. It was not something a stranger conducting research on the Ramsey family could have easily discovered. It was internal company information. Personal financial information. The note was written on paper torn from a notepad found in the Ramsey kitchen. The pen used to write it was found in the Ramsey home. The author had sat down inside the house, in the kitchen, or somewhere near it, and written 3 pages. That takes time. Even for someone writing quickly, 3 pages takes time. The note contains several linguistic curiosities. The phrase, "and hence," used twice. References to John Ramsey's military history, specifically a reference that seemed to know he had served in the Navy. The phrase, "listen carefully," which some analysts noted was more consistent with someone whose first language was not English, though others disagreed. The salutation, "Mr. Ramsey," rather than the more typical, "Dear Mr. Ramsey." Handwriting experts examined the note. The leading suspect at the time was Patsy Ramsey. Several analysts said they could not exclude her as the author. None said definitively that she had written it. Several said she had not. The note was also examined for DNA. None was recovered from the paper or the envelope. 3 pages. Written in the house. With the family's materials. Referencing private financial information. And yet, if the intruder theory is correct, written by someone who then descended to the basement, killed a 6-year-old child, and left without a trace. These facts have never been reconciled. The investigation that followed became a case study in institutional failure. Boulder was not a city accustomed to murders of this nature. The Boulder Police Department was experienced and professional, but this was not a straightforward case. Nothing about it was straightforward. The crime scene was contaminated in the first hours. Friends and family had moved through the house. Coffee cups had been touched. Surfaces had been handled. The opportunity to collect pristine forensic evidence was gone before the sun had fully risen on December 26. The police and the Ramseys developed an adversarial relationship almost immediately. John and Patsy Ramsey were advised by their attorneys to cooperate selectively. They gave statements but not always on the schedule the police requested. They declined to be interviewed separately for several months. This was legally their right. Investigators interpreted it as obstruction. The press became a complicating factor. Leaks, some accurate, some not, appeared in newspapers regularly. The Boulder Police Department and the Boulder District Attorney's Office were not always aligned in their approach to the case. Internal disagreements between investigators became public knowledge. By early 1997, the investigation had already developed a reputation for disorder. Detective Steve Thomas, one of the lead investigators, would later resign from the Boulder Police Department and write a book in which he concluded that Patsy Ramsey had killed her daughter, possibly accidentally, and that the family had covered it up. He believed the intruder theory was implausible. Others disagreed strongly. The disagreement was never resolved through evidence. It deepened over years into something more like competing religions, each side certain, neither side able to prove its certainty. There was a retired detective from Atlanta named Lou Smith. He had been brought in to assist the Boulder investigation in 1997. He had decades of experience with homicide cases. He had a reputation for solving the unsolvable. He examined the evidence and reached a conclusion opposite to Detective Thomas. Lou Smith believed in the intruder. He identified what he believed was evidence of an intruder's presence, scuff marks on a wall in the basement that suggested someone had climbed through a window. A blue suitcase positioned beneath that window that could have served as a step. Unidentified footprints in the basement. A high-tech boot print found in the mold around the drain in the basement that did not match any shoe owned by a member of the Ramsey family. He also pointed to the stun gun marks. There were 2 small marks on JonBenét's face and on her back that Lou Smith identified as consistent with the application of a stun gun. If accurate, this suggested a level of premeditation, someone who came prepared with a specific tool to subdue a child. A parent acting impulsively in the middle of the night would not typically bring a stun gun. Lou Smith became so convinced of the intruder theory that he eventually resigned from the investigation in protest when he felt the focus remained too narrowly on the family. He spent the rest of his life, voluntarily, unpaid, working to identify the intruder he believed had killed JonBenét Ramsey. He died in 2010, still investigating. The case was still unsolved when he died. In 1999, a grand jury convened to examine the evidence. Grand jurors heard testimony for 13 months. They reviewed physical evidence, interviewed witnesses, examined the ransom note analysis, the DNA findings, the timeline, the crime scene photographs. On October 13, 1999, the grand jury voted to return a true bill, an indictment, against both John and Patsy Ramsey. The charges were not murder. They were child abuse resulting in death, and being accessories to a crime. District Attorney Alex Hunter reviewed the indictment and the evidence. He concluded that there was insufficient evidence to secure a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. He declined to prosecute. The indictment was sealed. The public did not know it had existed. For 13 years, the official public position was that the grand jury had not reached an indictment. In 2013, a judge ordered the documents unsealed. The public learned, for the first time, how close the case had come to trial, and how different the outcome of that grand jury had been from what everyone had been told. John Ramsey responded with a statement. He said he was not surprised that a grand jury operating with incomplete information had reached a flawed conclusion. He maintained his innocence. There was a man named John Mark Carr. In August 2006, while teaching school in Bangkok, Thailand, he contacted a professor at the University of Colorado who had been researching the Ramsey case. In a series of emails, Carr claimed to have been with JonBenét when she died. He described the death as an accident. He said he had loved her. He was arrested in Bangkok and extradited to the United States. The case appeared to be solved. It was not solved. DNA testing of a sample collected from Carr did not match the unknown male DNA found at the crime scene. There was no physical evidence placing him in Boulder on December 25, 1996. His ex-wife stated that he had been with the family in Alabama for Christmas that year. John Mark Carr had not killed JonBenét Ramsey. He was, investigators concluded, an individual with a disturbing fixation on the case who had constructed an elaborate false confession. Charges were dropped. He was released. The case remained unsolved. The DNA was the pivot point around which everything turned. In the original processing of the crime scene, investigators had collected biological samples from JonBenét's clothing, specifically, from her underwear and from beneath her fingernails. Standard procedure. Routine evidence collection. When that evidence was tested, it revealed a DNA profile. Male. Unknown. Unmatched to anyone in the investigation. The profile did not match John Ramsey. It did not match Burke Ramsey. It did not match any of the family friends who had been in the house. It did not match any law enforcement officer who had been on scene. It did not match the detectives, the first responders, the neighbors. Unknown. Unidentified. A stranger. In 2003, advances in DNA technology allowed investigators to retest the samples. The results were consistent. The same unknown male profile. In 2008, the Boulder District Attorney's Office applied a relatively new technique, touch DNA, which can extract a genetic profile from skin cells deposited by simple contact, without the need for blood or saliva. The technique was applied to additional samples from JonBenét's clothing. The results matched the profile from the original testing. The same unknown male. Consistent across multiple samples. Consistent across 2 different testing methods. District Attorney Mary Lacey issued a letter to John Ramsey. She wrote that the weight of the evidence was more consistent with an intruder having committed the crime than with family involvement. She formally cleared the Ramsey family. The letter came on July 9, 2008. Patsy Ramsey had died 2 years earlier. On June 24, 2006, Patsy Ramsey died of ovarian cancer. The cancer had returned. She had known for some time that she was ill again. She died without knowing that the family would be formally cleared. She died having never been charged with anything. She died having never had the opportunity to see her name officially exonerated. She died still publicly associated, in many people's minds, with the death of her daughter. In 2016, a television documentary produced by CBS revisited the case with new forensic analysis. The documentary's conclusion pointed to Burke Ramsey. The theory was as follows: Burke had struck JonBenét with a flashlight during a dispute, possibly over pineapple, traces of which were found in JonBenét's stomach, suggesting she had eaten recently before her death, and a bowl of pineapple with both John and Patsy's fingerprints had been found on the kitchen table. The blow had been accidental. The parents, in shock and fearful of the consequences, had staged the scene to appear as a kidnapping gone wrong. The strangulation, in this theory, had been performed after death, or in the final moments of life, as part of the staging. Burke Ramsey filed a defamation lawsuit against CBS. The lawsuit was settled in 2019 for an undisclosed amount. CBS did not publicly retract its conclusions, but the settlement was widely interpreted as significant. The theory remains unproven. Burke Ramsey has never been charged with any crime related to his sister's death. He has rarely spoken publicly about the case. The unknown DNA profile has been entered into law enforcement databases. CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, the national database maintained by the FBI, contains profiles from convicted offenders, arrestees, and forensic evidence collected at crime scenes across the country. The JonBenét Ramsey DNA has been in that system for decades. It has never matched anyone. Advances in genetic genealogy, the technique that identified the Golden State Killer in 2018, by tracing DNA through relatives who had submitted samples to consumer ancestry databases, have been discussed in connection with the Ramsey case. Investigators have acknowledged that such techniques have been applied, or considered, in the investigation. No arrest has resulted. The profile of an unknown man who was inside that house on December 25 or 26, 1996, who left his DNA on the clothing of a 6-year-old child, exists in databases and has existed for nearly 30 years. He has not been identified. He may be dead. He may be living an ordinary life somewhere, unknown and unsuspected. He may have left the country and never returned. No one knows. There is a sequence of facts that, when laid out together, do not resolve cleanly into any single narrative. The ransom note was written inside the house, with the family's materials, and referenced a private financial figure known only to those close to John Ramsey. The unknown male DNA does not match any member of the family. The crime scene was handled so poorly in the first hours that evidence which might have resolved these contradictions was lost or contaminated before it could be properly collected. The grand jury that heard 13 months of testimony voted to indict the parents, not for murder, but for child abuse resulting in death and for being accessories. The DNA testing that came later cleared the family. Both things are on the record. Both carry the weight of official investigation. And they point in different directions. If an intruder killed JonBenét, he was someone who knew the Ramseys' private financial information, who wrote a 3-page note using their materials, who subdued and killed a child in a basement without leaving identifiable footprints in the snow outside, and whose DNA, found on the victim's clothing, has never matched anyone in any database over 3 decades of searching. If someone inside the house killed JonBenét, the unknown DNA requires explanation. Contamination. Prior contact. A possible alternative source that has never been fully ruled out. Neither theory is clean. Neither theory is complete. And neither theory, in 30 years, has produced an arrest. JonBenét Ramsey would have been 35 years old. She would have grown up in a world very different from the one she left behind. She would have had a life that had nothing to do with beauty pageants and ransom notes and crime scene photographs broadcast on cable television. She would have simply been a person. Her case file remains open in Boulder, Colorado. The Boulder Police Department has stated, at various points over the years, that the investigation is ongoing. That new leads are pursued. That the case has not been abandoned. No arrest has ever been made. No charge has ever been filed. No one has ever been tried for what happened in that house on the night of December 25, 1996. The answer, if there is one, has not yet been spoken aloud in a courtroom. It lives, still, in a DNA profile. In a 3-page ransom note. In the memory of the people who were there. In evidence that may exist and has not yet been found, or in evidence that has been examined so many times that it has given everything it has to give. The house on 15th Street still stands. JonBenét Ramsey is still waiting for an answer. Beyond the facts investigations. Case status, unsolved.